In the next few minutes, I'd like to explain for you what I found to be an extremely valuable technique in studying Scripture. Perhaps you've encountered it before in another course. It goes by the name a logical outline or concept mapping, developing either a logical outline or concept mapping. What's displayed before you is a page from the syllabus, and notice the far left column. What we're seeking to do here is determine how does the flow or the arrangement of major subpoints or themes within a passage then serve to sharpen its message and enrich its impact. This will achieve an outline of the passage, but it may be a little different sort of outline than you've engaged in before. By virtue of it being an outline, it serves the purpose of distilling units of thought into small, discrete, summary expressions. After explaining the steps, we'll walk through a sample. The sample will be taken from the early chapters of Genesis, and this will lead to you carrying out the same assignment. Your focal passage will be 2 Samuel 22. In the far right column, you can see the points available and the various subcategories where points will be awarded. Let's go then to the instructions in the second column on the left. You'll want to begin by reading over your scripture passage multiple times, perhaps 3 or 4 times. As you do so, attempt to begin to group verses together, verses that contribute to a similar segment of the poem or the narrative. As you group these verses, assign to each group a separate sentence. Here's one step where the concept mapping or the logical outline that I'll be asking you to carry out will be different than the kinds of outlines you may have done in the past. Typically, outlining calls for only phrase titles or phrase headings rather than complete sentences. Please notice I'm asking you to produce a complete sentence for each heading. I've discovered this is important because it requires that you include a verb. And as you include a verb, you will be tapping into the action that's latent at that level of either the story or the poem that you're studying. Now, as you devise these headings, you will indeed, as subpoint A indicates, reflect the distinct content of that given point. But you will not only reflect that isolated point, but step B, you will want to show how it may relate to what has preceded. Here again is an aspect of a logical outline which is different than a standard sort of a reductionist outline that simply boils down the components. Notice, please, this concept that we want you to show how a given heading relates to what precedes. Now, if it's the first heading in your overall passage of Scripture, it's not necessary to try and link it to the previous passage, the previous segment, which is outside your focal study. There are other ways to pay attention to that, as you know, through studying the boundaries, being attentive to where a passage falls within an overall book or adjacent chapters. What we're talking about here is just the relationship from one point to another right within the focal passage. So it will begin with your second heading. Here's how to achieve this explanation or this display of relationship of a given heading to what has preceded. Supply transitional phrases. Again, supply transitional phrases that will explain clearly how you understand, for example, point number 2 to relate to what has preceded, point number 1. And I'm going to ask that those transitional phrases would be produced in italics. That way it's very clear, very easy for me to know that you indeed have been thinking about the transition, the flow of thought. And incidentally, this is why we call it a logical outline. We're trying to trace the logic of the passage, the flow of thought. Notice the next instruction in column 2. Please do not rush to someone else's commentary volume and simply adopt their outline. It's entirely possible that you could come up with a commentary. You might find a commentary which has in fact outlined the passage that we're concentrating on, or that you're studying on for your next preparation. However, if you rush to a commentary and bypass the process of studying the passage yourself, you will be cheating yourself of an opportunity to hear God's message in its full richness. Don't do that to yourself. Rather, do your own thinking at this point. Later on, if you wish, you can consult the commentary, but it's very important that you do your own inductive work at this point. That's how the passage is going to really get into your heart and soul, and the message then will become clear. And in addition, it's entirely possible that someone else's outline may have missed some of the logical flow that you will detect. And if you simply rely on someone else's outline, it's very possible you'll miss not only the impact, but also the accuracy of its message. The next step, after you've actually crafted the outline, I'll ask you to write a brief summary of the flow of thought. A summary. And this will be in the form of a short paragraph. These will be complete sentences that will, in essence, talk through what is otherwise presented as points and subpoints, these headings. In a moment, we'll then turn to the example, which follows in the next page of your syllabus, the example taken from Genesis 1. As we talk through that example, you'll see some additional fine points of instruction which have not been articulated in column 2 on the left. In the next portion of the video, we'll focus on an example taken from Genesis 1.